The following podcast may include coarse language, graphic content, and politically and/or religiously sensitive material. Those of you who are offended by such content should fuck off. Hey there! We're doing the Daemoneye podcast. Again. At least I think we are.
I'm not too sure on that. I thought it had something to do with peanut butter.
No. Well, yes. No more peanut butter. Not after Tuesday nights 2 years ago. That was a dark day.
We have to wait another 8 years for the statute of limitations, man.
Fair enough. This is the Daemoneye podcast, episode 17, and this is the podcast where we discuss tabletop and PC role-playing games, science fiction, fantasy, science technology, geek culture, and the secrets of the Quaker-Oat Illuminati.
Are you sure? I always thought they were a myth.
Oh, they're quite real.
That's not what my paycheck says.
All right, so this will probably be a very informal podcast, a little shorter one, because I've been busy grading and haven't had much time to do the research I usually could on the topic, which is ostensibly Wild West role-playing games. But it kind of fits because there's not as much we can say about this topic, partly because, there aren't a lot of role-playing games set in the Wild West, and a lot has been said about it before in many other mediums, and I think our own knowledge of it is somewhat limited, right, Tyler?
Well, I wouldn't say limited.
That's why I said somewhat. I added that qualifier.
Actually, I got a fair amount.
Okay, fair enough. But we do have a couple of other topics we're going to discuss while we're here, kind of call it a potpourri of topics. We have a few requested topics from our dedicated viewers and fans, all 20 of them. Well, 3 of the 20 at least. So we'll probably cover those as well. So hang in, this might be a bumpy ride. Of course, I said that last time, but...
maybe we should do what Coca-Cola did and put cocaine in our products. That way it attracts more repeat business. Digital
cocaine. How would that work?
I don't know. Maybe snort.gif?
Well, as soon as they develop, mind-machine interface, we got those better than life chips going. That'll be fun.
Hey, they are working on brain lace.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So how's our banter there? Did you hear did you get that email from let's not say his name, but a former player way back in the day?
Yeah, actually, I did see that.
Yeah.
It was really surprising to hear back from him.
Yeah. Apparently, we need to work on our banter, quote unquote.
I always assumed that he was deeply involved in some, black top secret project.
I think he had spent some time at Microsoft.
Oh, so instead of black top secret project, he spent time at the top, or he spent time in Mordor.
Actually, if you want to, I can go on his LinkedIn and find out right now, but let's not bother with that. So, well, we'll try to work on the banter there on the off chance you're listening to us.
Hey, I'm just glad he escaped Mordor.
Oh, yeah, by the way back in the day, when I was still running the D&D 3rd edition campaign for you, people with crossbows do not provoke attacks of opportunity via melee. I just wanted to settle that once and for all. Okay? Mr. I know all the rules to the new system.
Use a ranged weapon in melee, you get an attack of opportunity. It doesn't matter what the ranged weapon is.
No, as in, if you wield a crossbow and someone moves in out of your threatened range, you can whack them with your crossbow for free.
Oh, you mean crossbows count as a melee weapon club?
Yes.
Yeah.
They do not. So, let's go ahead. What do you want to do? Oh, let's talk about what we've been doing so far. Personal stuff and company stuff. Well, personal stuff, the semester has started for me again. I am grading. I won't say which colleges, of course, but I will say that one of the 2 colleges I'm working at has still to assign me my email count, my employee ID, give me access to Canvas, and be able to contact students. That's been about, and we're into the third week right about now.
Well, I'm still trying to rent out my 2 spare rooms. It's like a seasonal thing. I just started renting them right after everybody left to go home for the season from college. And I've had to start beating the crap out of a new area on the tree in my backyard because I beat all the bark off of the section I was using.
The bark is a living part of the tree. You're basically killing the tree.
The tree's already dead. That's why I'm beating on it.
Ah, okay. So I'm going to cut it down so you can have a stump and do a stump talk on it?
Well, no. I figured I might as well get some use out of it before I have to uproot it and have it hauled out because it's full of bugs and rot and shit. So I'm using it for my Makawara.
Fair enough. Beyond that...
How else am I going to turn my hands into maces?
Sure enough. Well, you could do what the monks did and ram your hand into hot sand and slowly lift it up.
Yeah, but sand gets everywhere.
Fair enough. Let's see. Other than that, I have started writing more regularly again because, as I predicted, I actually have a modicum of free time on my hands, so that's good. I do have a couple of ideas which may actually go beyond the embryonic stage at this point, since I can now finally focus on my more creative sides. Managed to go and work out a little bit more and go to the gym finally. I really forgot what it's like to have some free time on your hands, so that may be changing soon, but I should be all right. Beyond that, it's still winter here in California, but it's been getting a little bit warmer. That's always is more pleasant. There's actually some sun outside.
Yeah, we had a snowstorm last week.
A snowstorm? I've heard of this snow you speak of.
Yeah, evidently you get about a week, or during the winter months, you get about a week worth of snow every month. 2 days here, 1 day here, 3 days here, or 3 days there, kind of thing, where it comes in and it just snows all the time, and then it's clear the rest of the month.
So did you take the time to get out of your new house, romp around in the snow, and make a snow xenomorph?
I kind of already did that in my backyard, and then it melted. It seems it was too close to my hot tub.
Tyler, how about you? How's work progressing on Heroes of Horror?
Actually, it's progressing fairly fast. I've done a lot of stuff for the Machine era, which is the World War I through World War II era. So we're running our ongoing campaign where we're taking the after the Mind Wars concept of the only known town left, and it's full of refugees, and the rest of the world is just turned to shit. There might be other civilizations out there, but you have to find them and contact them. We're taking that and we're putting it into the modern day by saying that Hitler managed to develop nukes in I think it was 1942. The Axis allies got nukes and started nuking everybody, and then retaliation bombing occurred, and now the world is a desolate radioactive hellhole, and you have the town that you're in that has managed to survive. Well, actually, we're doing it in Albuquerque.
Well, actually, again, I'll preface this by saying that the After the Mind Wars concept has been one of the most consistently popular approaches to role-playing games, even if it's D&D Pi that we've had so far, because it's just so easy to run.
Yeah, you can even hot seat DM it. You just have one guy who comes up with an adventure, sits down, runs it for a few sessions to go through the adventure, and then the next guy with an idea for an adventure, you just swap out.
I've toyed with the idea of making basically a miniature sort of representation of the town with grass-felted hexagons representing sections of the town with little miniature buildings to represent town improvements and improved walls. But again, I don't have that much free time on my hand right now. I'm guessing if you do a modern version of the After the Mind Wars campaign, it's compulsory to call your town Jericho, though.
Actually, since we're doing it in Albuquerque, we have a lot of Wild West stuff happening, which is one of the reasons I thought it was appropriate to bring up for this podcast.
Mm-hmm. All right. So it is going a lot more smoothly than, say, Dragonfire this time?
Oh, yeah. We even had a duel, just yesterday. We had one character who ended up challenging a monster to a duel over the dragon horde that they were fighting over. The monster, the rules for the duel were it had to be mano a mano, just fists and stuff, because the monster didn't bring a gun, and no magic, no outside interference or any of that. But of course, both of them cheated like a motherfucker.
It's part of the game. Well, I've been running a Dead Stars campaign, if you want to talk about role-playing things we've been running. And it's interesting concept which I brought in. The players have essentially been hired. The players have bought into a collective partnership of a Helazara captain. He insists he never has employees. Instead, they have to pay a fee, and they become co-owners of the starship, 0.01%, and they don't get a wage then, since they're owners, not employees.
Co-op starship captain.
Well, yes, he's a Helazar. He claims that way they're all co-owners and he'll share the profit. That way he doesn't have to pay them regular wages, since they're all co-owners of it. I haven't even gotten started yet.
Freaking used car salesman of the galaxy.
Do you think? And I gave him for fun an Indian accent. I'm not trying to be racist there. Just I thought of some sort of accent which could sound, foreign enough to them, and that's what I went with. All right. So the concept here is that he wants to launder minerals. Okay, I'll keep it brief here. So there is a system which I developed, which might be included in the Walking the Black expansion setting, called New Iran, which is basically, Space Dubai / Saudi Arabia. And while they have a lot of mining on planet, there's also a lot of mining out of the system, in the system itself, and other planets, moons, etc. But because they have virtually no space presence, they're too busy fighting on ground and are still kind of on the primitive side. They got out of 2 wars. While in theory, every single one of the rulers has a stake and ownership to one of the asteroids and one of the moons and planets, none of them can take advantage of it. Now, of course, that means the system is just filled with illegal miner. Well, not filled, but there are a lot of illegal mining operations around the system, and they can't do anything about it, or they're not even aware of it because they have no patrol ships. They're too busy fighting on the ground. The problem, though, is that if you try to smuggle or even bring any minerals from outside the world, the central world, New Iran, down there, they'll come down at you on an even bigger stack of rocks, because that's competition, and that they know that even though they can't prove it, if it's not from the planet itself, the rocks probably came from the surrounding system, and that belongs to the rulers. So the problem, of course, is that the best place to refine the raw minerals from the asteroids is on the planet. You can make a lot more money not having to refined on New Aram and even manufactured in New Aram there, instead of having to lug those gigantic chunks of raw ore out of system. So it's kind of a natural limiter. Now, this captain's plan, his plan is to essentially find one of the rulers. They're called sultans, of course, one of the mid-tier ones who's ambitious, and pay an exorbitant fee to actually legally acquire mining rights on one of the asteroids. Okay? Now, in addition to that, he'll also offer to patrol the place for him and actually act as some sort of mercenary police force. But at the same time, he's going to offer to run the mine, quote unquote, as a launder service. So if all the illegal miners in the area, they can come in, dump their rocks at the mine, and then they'll claim it was just mined there, and it becomes basically clean rocks they can send to New Aram and get it refined and make money off it. And they'll just take he'll take a little bit of a cut from the other miners. So they're literally they're not money washing, they're asteroid washing. Yeah.
If you want to do the short version, 1960s Middle East sovereignty wars in space.
Where do you think I got the idea from? And not all our viewers are as familiar with history as we are, especially you. So that's a long concept. Sorry, I went far longer than I had to.
Okay, so what's first on the chopping block?
Well, we can go right into the actual topic, which we, in theory, prepped for, which is Wild West, RPG settings and games, or we can run through a few of the topics which our readers / listeners / fans want us to go through. What do you want?
Let's knock off one of the topics first.
All right. So here's one. Let's see here. Any PC games that we love from back in the day? Back in the day for us would be the 90s and early 2000s for you goddamn Gen Zers.
Two of them. For me, it was always Temple of Elemental Evil and what the hell is the name of that other one? I suddenly can't remember it. Damn brain farts. Temple of Elemental Evil and Magic and Steamworks Obscura. What is the subtitle of it?
Arcana. Arcanum, excuse me. Yeah.
Oh, I loved those games. Admittedly, the combat system in Arcanum was a little hedgy because you would get into a fight, but you couldn't control exactly when you get into a fight. So you'd have a creature on the other side of the map that you're trying to shoot, but until you actually hit it, you wouldn't initiate a fight. And a lot of times, even when you did hit it, you had to wait for it to run up to you to get within combat radius. But other than that, the actual setting for that was phenomenal.
It was pretty well done. Yeah, the setting was pretty well written. Some interesting concepts, especially somewhat intelligent take on on the definitions of what magic versus technology are, using versus twisting the laws of reality. The combat was a little jank though, because I found the best way to win that game was just to make a whole bunch of Molotov cocktails. You did that, every fight became that, and get the dog. You do that, yeah. And there was in theory you could do it either turn-based or you could do it real time, but no one ever played real time because you would have to have reflexes of a freaking weasel to get through that. It's insane.
Yeah. Then the flip side to that was the old Temple of Elemental Evil game, where the combat system was massively superior to, most of the turn-based stuff that we got going today. But the story was bare bones minimum at the least.
It was a dungeon crawler. There's dungeons, that's all you really need back in the day. I did not play, I did play Temple of Elemental Evil once at Gen Con 2002. It's a demo. I never ended up buying it, though. Any other?
Yeah, I downloaded and added some mods to it that increased the added extra storylines outside of the dungeon that you could play through, and it added extra characters that you could get, and it added extra items into the random item system, and that actually really helped improve it. But at the end of the day, it's basically a dungeon crawler. Mm-hmm. That was just a little bit more complicated than Diablo.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. For me, it would probably be Planescape Torment because A, it was very well written, and B, Planescape is one of my favorite old AD&D settings. Love that game. And in fact, I saw quite a bit of that, and it was mentioned as a main inspiration of the recent role-playing game I played, Disco Elysium. So yeah, and definitely did remind me of Torment a little bit. The heavy emphasis on good writing, the basic layouts, kind of the trippy, otherworldly psychology of it. Well, that's definitely one. Beyond that, and the funny thing is, I still have a bunch of my old PC game CDs right here. They'll probably they'll ever use again.
Icewind Dale.
I have that one as well. Not my favorite, but I did play it, and that and Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate was pretty, but Torment for me was the top Black Isle games. Yeah, game.
Yeah, Icewind Dale was pretty fun, but the sequel, Icewind Dale 2, was just superior in every way.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird mishmash hybrid of second and third edition rules, though, there, as I recall.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. But they had to. I understand why they did a lot of the rules changes that they did, because of the needs of a computer system, as opposed to what you can get away with on a pen and paper game when people can ask questions.
Mm-hmm. True. Let's see other standouts PC games for me. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Look at my here. Well, that was a major one. I was a big fan of Alpha Centauri, which is basically just Civilization.
Yeah, Civilization in space.
Yeah, then the the weird spiritual sequel to it, Beyond After Earth. It mirrors After Earth or something, which was kind of meh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what else.
It was one of those, or was it? It was Sid Meier's After Earth was one of those games that decided it wanted to play, basically be a sequel to Alpha Centauri. It took a shot. It hit a bullseye, but it hit the bullseye on the wrong target.
Yeah, pretty much. Beyond that, the only one that really stands out to me is the first actual MMORPG, Ultima Online. I actually played that. That's going way back, though. That one was before EverQuest.
Yeah, I could never get into that one, nor EverQuest, actually. They had the news about EverQuest Next coming out, and I was all psyched to get into that, and it got canceled right before release.
Yeah, then eventually came World of Warcraft, and pretty much nothing else surpassed that, or probably will in the MMORPG realm, which is a shame.
Yeah, not until people break out of the Warcraft clone mentality.
Yeah, I mean there were a bunch of other semi-successful MMORPGs around that time that actually survived around Warcraft. I mean, there was, remember, Anarchy Online?
Actually, something I'm surprised that we don't see more of is squad RPGs. Like a squad-based shooter where you and a few friends are playing against other teams. But instead of it being against other teams, it's an RPG setting but everybody, or you and everybody else who's in your local area network takes over or loads a character and runs through the scenario.
There's always difficulties in that because, multiple players mean it almost always has to be in real time. Role-playing games, even, more action ones, and require a little more thought, a little more time, number crunching, and that's not well suited for multiplayer.
They managed to get away with it with Star Wars, only they morphed it onto this weird pseudo MMORPG framework, but it was still just a few people going through scenarios. You would just have, basically a lobby system on steroids where you would meet up with people who go like, who needs to do scenario X? I need to do scenario X over here. So smuggler needing to do scenario X.
Yeah, and there's the problem. Yeah, it's kind of it's not really immersive as a role-playing game there. I don't think you can really beat a tabletop role-playing game for a cooperative experience like that.
That's what I mean. If you take out the MMO aspect of it, so it's only people that you actually know either in real life or online, and you all just log into whoever's computer is running the root program, and then you just run the scenario. And the only people who can do that scenario are people that you know, so you can build a relationship with them like you would at a table.
Okay, can't think of anything else that really stands out. And since they're only asked about PC games, I will include console games. Anything you can think of?
Well, are we including console games?
We are not. Just let's go with PC. And there's actually a point to split them up for the older ones, because there was a difference between console and PC games back in the day. These days, not so much.
Yeah. If we were including console games, we're talking the era of the SNES and the PlayStation 1. At that point, we'll be here for hours.
Exactly. That's why I said just PC games. There were some damn good PC games, but nothing those are the ones that just stand out for us during that early period, I guess.
Yeah, those are the ones that are basically form parts of our foundational viewpoints.
Ones we could still play right now and still kind of enjoy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Timeless, I believe, is the phrase often used.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, so another topic from the peanut gallery. What about the cruelty of some companies destroying beloved franchises with only the purposes of winning money? Well, we're not the first person to discuss that sort of thing. Pretty sure.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing people don't understand. The whole purpose of a company, well, not the purpose, but the lifeblood of a company is making more money than it's losing. Because every company operates at a loss. It's just the loss is then mitigated by the income. If a company does not make more money than it is expending, it dies, and you end up with a franchise that croaks after one publication. So companies have to make money. But the flip side of that is companies, especially game companies, make money by engendering themselves with the tastes of their target audience. If a company decides to say, oh, take a space-based horror game that's a single-person experience and it's all about survival against this impossible eldritch horror, and turns it into a looter shooter where you have to pay real money in order to get loot, that's totally diametrically opposed to the tastes of their target audience. They were targeting it towards a first person horror kind of like horror Diablo in space. I should say, like more like Doom, I guess, would be in space. But then they just decided to turn it into Call of Duty. Well, Call of Duty players have a game that they are already going to be playing. It's called freaking Call of Duty.
Let's just stop. Get down to it. You're talking about Dead Space 3 with the former, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, same here. I actually enjoyed the Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2 games. They were single-player horror. That was worked. Dead Space 3 was still decent. In fact, I still have it on my PlayStation. But, yeah, it was sad to see it go. Thanks, EA.
They did it just to milk money, to get more money coming in. But it ended up making them less money than they could have made just by making a straight-up Dead Space 3.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it was one of the earlier games to start doing microtransactions and, and virtual coins you can use to buy skins and cheats and shit. Remember way back in the day when in PC games and console games, those are things you can get for free with cheat codes or unlocking them via gameplay. Now, a lot of the games you have to pay about the price of another copy of the game to get just half of that stuff.
I heard a commenter make a point on it, and it actually is true. It's what happens when game companies when a company starts and it's an actual successful one and it puts out a successful product. That's because the control of that company the company is under control of the artist whose vision they're following. But as the company gets successful and it gets larger, the artist gets muscled out by the bean counters, and once that happens, this franchise died.
It's ideally a balance between reality and the artistic visions. If you want to have your head in the clouds, you have to have your feet in the ground. But that basically, yes. It's also an issue, I think, of companies thinking in large profits in the short term. Because that's all the investors think of, the next quarter or the next year. They don't consider what we're doing in 5 years. Well, most of the upper end administrators and CEOs, executives won't think that, because if things go belly under, they just hop to another company. And if the franchise dies, so what?
But it seems to work best, at least for long-term survivability of companies. I mean, it's what happened to Blizzard until recent occurrences, obviously.
That's not Blizzard. That's, what is it, Activision with its hand stuck up its ass.
That's my point. What seems to happen best is when the artists control the company, but the bean counters have veto power. So the bean counters aren't making the decisions on what the company should do. They're making decisions on what the company can't do.
And honestly, this would anger me a lot more. But here's the thing. I don't play a lot of AAA games.
Honestly, neither do I. The only one I'm playing right now is Fallout 4. And that's because I have more mods on my disk for Fallout 4 in terms of space than I have for the installation of Fallout 4.
Because, there are enough decent, smaller indie games on both Steam and, if you want to be a little soulless, the Epic Game Store to keep you happy. And I played the AAA games, and I've gotten a lot more enjoyment, a lot more satisfaction out of, Stardew Valley. I played it for 200 hours, and I spent virtually no time on that compared to, say, Resident Evil. The Resident Evil remake, that was fun, but it was a AAA remake, and I played it once and I was done. I'm still getting entertainment value out of Stardew Valley even right now. So, whatever. What just infuriates me, or what frustrates me, or perhaps what just baffles me, is why you have so many people following this goddamn mobile market system. They are paying for the game, then they're paying more than that for all these mods. Even in some of the better examples of that, like, let's say, Fortnite.
And the free mod, the free mods that you can get are almost always superior to the paid mods.
Yeah. So basically, general gaming public, stop playing these games. No, keep playing them, but don't buy coin stores. Don't coins from stores. Don't buy add-ons. Just buy the game and play. And if the game sucks as is without buying all the add-ons, like let's say, I don't know, the newest Assassin's Creed game, don't buy it or bitch at the publishers.
Yeah, if the game sucks without the microtransaction purchase stuff, then it doesn't matter if the microtransaction purchase stuff makes the game decent or playable or even good. The core fact of the matter is they sold you a sucky game.
All right, we should probably stop there because this topic has been said many, many more times by people much more obsessed than we are, and we're just kind of rehashing it or preaching to the choir here in all likelihood. So let's move on to last one, which is a little weird. What about the old fantasy movies that seem to be more risky and dark than the new fantasy ones?
Old fantasy movies used to be passion projects.
Yeah.
I mean, take a look at Willow. They never expected that to make money. Willow was made exclusively because the producer of Willow made a deal where he would not the producer, but the director of Willow made a deal where he would direct another movie that was supposed to be a massive moneymaker if they funded Willow.
Well, there aren't a lot of old fantasy movies that I can think of off the top of my head, at least not a lot of higher, upper budget ones. The influx of more fantasy blockbusters, all that was kind of on the low side until, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, the only old fantasy movies that I can think of that were actually because usually genre movies were considered to be box office poison until Star Wars came around. But fantasy movies are genre movies. Obviously, it's the fantasy genre. But the only ones that I can think of that broke the mold, and of course, all passion projects that overcame expectations, were Willow, Lady Hawk, and Dragon Slayer.
Wasn't there also Hawk? Oh, did you already say Hawk the Slayer?
No, I said Lady Hawk and Dragon Slayer.
Oh, Dragon Slayer.
Those are ones that broke the mold and, to everybody's surprise, made mad profits.
Mm-hmm. But would you call them more dark than some of the fantasy movies or series these days, really?
Oh, they were all freaking dark. I mean, those were some nihilist fucking movies. Even Lady Hawk, which was a love story with... that movie was so dark that if you showed it to to one of these SJW pussy ass audiences today, you'd come back in when the credits were rolling to find they've all slit their wrists. It's a love story.
Yeah, so was Romeo and Juliet. It wasn't exactly pleasant.
Neither
was Le Mort d'Arthur, the death of King Arthur. That was a love story. It had one of the most horribly depressing endings out there.
Yeah.
The only worst one I can think of is the English Patient or Empire of the Rising Sun, if you ignore the last 5 minutes. All right. So I guess the short answer for you is the passion project, but there really weren't a lot of old fantasy movies or series back in the day. I mean, and there are some dark ones these days too, honestly. I mean, I hate to bring up the example, but, Game of Thrones, at least the first couple seasons.
What was that one with Vin Diesel with the Witch Hunter?
Van Diesel with the Witch Hunter?
Vin Diesel who played a witch hunter.
Wasn't it just called Witch Hunter or something?
Might have been. That one was pretty dark.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, there you go. That's all I can think of, at least. There aren't, anything.
Yeah, most fantasy movies these days seem to go for the high adventure concept, or they seem to go for a comedy fantasy like the original Mummy.
Yeah. That's more of an general action genre film, I think.
Yeah.
Well, we all know what the very darkest, most depressing fantasy film of all, though, is the original D&D movie.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I just managed to exorcise those abominations from my brain.
It was the only film I actually ever walked out of, too.
I wish I could say the same, but there were some films that came out recently that were just like, Why am I even paying gas money to go to the theater for this bullshit?
No, I think the D&D movie has that beat. I mean, Jeremy Irons' performance. The fucking dwarf, Tyler. The dwarf. Remember the dwarf? They actually said low-level magic user in it. Unironically.
That movie, the only good part about it was Jeremy Irons trying to play off as Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, but you could tell it was almost going for that ironically over-the-top ham, but the fact that it was self-aware didn't work. And it should have, but it didn't. That's what made it even more horrible.
Honestly, I think Jeremy Irons was trying to play off that his character knew that he was a character in a bad movie.
That just didn't work for me, and all the rest was just even more awful. I mean, it got slightly better towards the end, but I think it was just the anticipation of it actually ending.
Yeah.
There was the other D&D movie, official D&D movie after that, which is actually decent, but that's it.
Actually, I think they're up to 4 D&D movies now.
I've only seen the one after, which we saw together, and I just, they're... Yeah, I think it's kind of like 40K. It's just not meant to be, even though it has great potential.
A problem that I think that they have with fantasy movies today is, well, twofold. First off, most of them are adaptations of existing works. And secondly, the adaptation is twisted and malformed because instead of trying to appeal to the audience that made the original work popular enough to get an adaptation, they're trying to appeal to what they think is the existing movie audience, and then they're surprised as hell when it flops.
Well, I mean, that's inherent. You're always going to be harder selling a secondary world in a movie or any book or any media because you do not live on Galthon, the world of dragons. You live on planet Earth in the 21st century. Okay, it takes more work for an audience to relate to it, and therefore, if it's hard for the audience to relate to the characters in the setting, it's harder for the story to work. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, but if you make the adaptation with the intent or with your decisions being the goal of selling it to the original fans already can sympathize with the setting and with the characters, can relate to them because they did originally.
No, I'm not saying you can't make it work and make it relate because that's what, again, the earlier season of the Game of Thrones worked because they were able to push through that barrier. I'm just saying that's why it's rare because it's harder because of that. That's the reason why you don't see a lot of fantasy. Sci-fi kind of works because there's a vague understanding that maybe this will be our future, so it could be seen as a cautionary tale, so it has more relatability. But fantasy, I don't think we're going to ever have dragons and magic in this planet, so you're limited there. All right. So that's the 3 suggestions we had, unless there's any comments you want to add, Tyler?
Oh, there are a lot of comments that I could add, but we're only supposed to be doing an hour-long podcast.
Well, we might do a little less than an hour, but let's just go from there. Okay, so let's end it there. Thanks for your comments, guys. So let's move on to the actual topic, the Wild West. So what time period do you think, Tyler, includes the Wild West? From what day to what year to what year?
Well, basically, the Wild West is from about a decade or so after the end of the Civil War, right up to just before the 20th century starts, so around 1880, 1890.
That sounds fair, because once you get into the Roaring 20s or thereabouts, that's when you can think the Wild West is officially ending. So it's Civil War ending around 1864, I believe. Is that right? Or 65?
Yeah, give it like a good, depending upon what you think of as the Wild West, you can give it anywhere from 50 to 80 years.
Mm-hmm. And here's a surprising question for you. Do you think it has to be set in America?
Oh, fuck no.
Okay, so what would you consider to be a Wild West analog?
Have you ever seen the TV series Penny Dreadful?
Mm-hmm. I saw a couple episodes there.
That was in the middle of the time period of the Wild West. They even had a character from the Wild West as one of the main characters.
I remember, but is it actually what do you consider it to be a Western Wild West show?
Oh, no. To be a Western, it has to take place in the American West.
Okay.
But to be a Wild West movie, it would have to take place in the time area with influences from. Because, like I said, Penny Dreadful, one of the main characters, was from the Wild West. That a big interpersonal drama that went on in the show was his viewpoint on how society should act, as juxtaposed with the viewpoint of these uptight British gentlemen. And then you have this guy walking in with a 6-shooter on his hip and, going up to the barkeep and going, "Give me a whiskey," in the middle of a gentleman's club.
So essentially the Wild West or Westerns, they are a uniquely American mythology. Would you say, would that be fair to say?
Yeah. Very fair. That's one of the reasons that so much of the world is interested in that area, in that phenomenon. I mean, Wild West, Wild West tchotchke culture is very popular in the Orient. And people have like little cowboys on horse miniatures and stuff like that. Posters of Boot Hill.
Mm-hmm. So what properties, beyond just being in America during this time period, what gives it its appeal, its unique flavor? It's pretty much the only mythology that the United States uniquely has.
I think it's because it's a mixture of the idea of people separated from the comforts of society, trying to brave and tame a new frontier, mixed in with the idea of the honorable warrior.
Of course, in reality, there are hardly any cowboy honorable warriors. There were some, though. Wild Bill Hitchcock, the Ledge, and Doc Holliday. Some of the stuff about them, they were pretty okay people in some regards.
Yeah. During the Wild, those large personalities were the ones that got all the headlines, and because of that, it's those personalities that people associate with the Wild West. People would think that even here in America, back during the period, people thought, or New York and Boston and wherever, thought that if you went too far west, you'd run into constant gunfights and duels.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It was mythology, even in its own time,
even in its own nation.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically focused on the idea of the frontier, and America really was the last frontier in recent memory. In fact, it was the New World. The only other analogy would be South America, which was a frontier, but that was really rapidly conquered by the Spanish, but America was a little bit different.
Yeah, in America, we actually tried coexistence for all the good that did.
Not really. It was more like constantly scooting someone out of a chair until they realize they're standing in the middle of the freeway.
I did say try.
Try. No, we pretended, I think is a better way to putting it.
No. We didn't pretend. We actually did try. But then there's a separation between what the people wanted and what the government wanted.
Yes.
The people wanted, or at least when you got the further east you went, wanted coexistence. The further west you went, they just wanted fucking bloody revenge for the latest massacre or farm raising. Whereas the government would use those massacres and farm raisings as an excuse to annex more land and drive more Indians off of the lands that they had by treaty. Those Indians would get pissed and go attack a town, and the cycle just keeps repeating. There was no good side in the conquering of the West,
with some exceptions where the Indians remained peaceful throughout, like that one southwestern tribe. What was that one called again?
I can't remember the name of them.
Is it the Navajo?
Yeah,
is it the Navajo? I'm not sure it is.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I should remember the name of them because they live about 10 miles north of me.
Oh, for shame, Tyler, for shame. Well,
no, I'm not joking. That's where the reservation starts.
No, I know. I'm saying for shame you can't think of the name because of that.
Well, I am only new to Albuquerque.
Okay. So anyways, lost my train of thought there. There are also all these iconic images, the lone cowboy, buffalo herds, the trains, the great train railways, although they've had those in England for ages, so it wasn't American, but still the sheer span of the distance.
The Indian chief on a horse.
Yeah. So we had all this iconography. A lot of it was actually real too. Okay. There are a lot of things made up though, like the idea of the showdown at high noon. That almost never happens. Like, I think there's only one report of that actually been happening. Most of the times, gunfighters would ambush each other in bars and behind, or they would fight like at point blank range, firing a couple of shots, like literally feet away from each other. The fight at the OK Corral was another exception to that rule, though it was pretty brutal.
And then there's all the freaking times they captured Billy the Kid. And the funny thing about it that most people don't know about the history is out of all the times they captured Billy the Kid, most of them were because they agreed to pardon him, for the whole Billy the Kid thing with him becoming an outlaw started with him and everybody saying that he shot a guy in self-defense. but because the guy I think his cousin was the sheriff of the town. The sheriff of the town, declared Billy Kid an outlaw, and accused him of murder, and he had to flee, and then that just started the whole train wreck of his life.
Mm-hmm. So with all this going on, the popularity of the setting itself, spaghetti westerns alone, the various analogs you can have to a traditional fantasy role-playing game setting, a party of adventurers or a party of vagabond cowboys. There are many, there are a lot of different scenarios that could easily work, and because it is a relatively lawless area where sometimes the rule of law is the rule of the fastest gun or the best speaker, you would think it'd be fertile ground for role-playing games, but it really isn't. There are only a handful of dedicated Wild West role-playing games.
The Wild West even had dungeons.
Mm-hmm. What are those?
Mines. Abandoned
mines. Oh, the Gold Rush. Another famous now. Yeah. So there are only a handful of Western role-playing games. And I can't even think of a single role-playing game, more traditional with stats and stuff set in the Wild West on a PC. The only one I can think of is a Japanese RPG called Wild Arms, and it's only a Western game by set. It has a Western theme to a Western motif, but it's not set in America during that time period, so it's only kind of Western. They also have guns, but
Well, there's also Red Dead Redemption, but honestly, Red Dead Redemption is more like how best to phrase it. Red Dead Redemption is more like Skyrim, but instead of being ancient Celtic, ancient Nordic fantasy, it's Wild West. It's a completely new world, but we're going to make it the Western aesthetic.
Well, it's not a role-playing game; it's a Rockstar game. That's almost a saying in itself these days.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so
there's Wasteland.
Wasteland. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's like a futuristic Wild West, if you want to get technical.
Well, you said yourself that Wild West or Westerns have to be in America during this period. So that's maybe my original question to you. Does it have to be that period to be considered Wild West or Wild West or Western? Maybe that's not true.
Well, it has to be that period to be Wild West, but it doesn't have to be that period to be Western. Is what I was trying to get across. You can have Wild West elements in other areas at the same time or in similar locations, such as what Wastelands does or what Red Dead Redemption does, but instead, populating it with Wild Western elements and lore, and then it's still at that point it's a Western, but it's not a Wild West game.
Okay.
Because it doesn't take place in the American West of the 1800s.
Fair enough. And those themes, motifs would be frontier, lawlessness, gunfights.
Frontier,
isolation,
gunfights.
Lawlessness.
Only a moderate amount of available technology. So you would have, you have horses, but as your main mode of transportation. But for long distance transportation, you can have trains.
Mm-hmm. and in a latter stage encroachment of civilization upon the wild, and is that a good thing, is that a bad thing? So those are we can definitely have a Western or Wild West, as you put it. I mean, I'm not sure if those are the technical terms for it as outlined by the Inner Council of Geeks, but no, I think your point is well taken, because here's another setting which I think more people should consider. Australia during the early days. Colonial Australia. There are a lot of analogies to the Wild West in Australia.
Yeah, if you did Australia after the after the collapse of the penal colony system, when it actually started turning into a frontier-style nation, that could be considered to be very close. Although
very close.
The technology would be a bit of a touchy subject.
What do you mean?
Well, it isn't like they had a shit ton of horses.
True. But they had some horse, and there were ranches there, and there were native dwellers there. There was the Aborigines. So I think if you want to have it that's a close thing to have to a Wild West, not set in America during that time periods. But the point is, you can have both, and they're both interesting. They are both ripe for games, and you can also introduce these concepts. You can have like a space western. I mean, that was what Firefly was basically.
Oh, totally.
You see. And you can even have a Western fantasy where you have that's what you played in Heroes of Horror, for example.
Yeah, that's very true.
But again,
the elf with no name.
Despite all this, it is very popular for, say, for stories, for movies, Wild Wild West, and even series, but not a lot as far as role-playing game goes. We already mentioned Wild Arms and Wastelander as...
Well, if we're talking about tabletop role-playing games, the only one I can think of is Deadlands.
There's Deadlands, and that is technically Wild West, although it's kind of alternative history thing, since there are very strong fantasy... Well, there's magic in it, let's face it. There is a older role-playing game from TSR. It's actually a fairly old one called Boot Hill, which was actually set in the Wild West. There were 3 editions, but it never was as huge as D&D. And there was actually this is coming from Wikipedia, mind you, so it's not any great knowledge on my part. But the reasons why it was not considered to be popular was how the mass appeal of the D&D Tolkien-esque fantasy. I don't quite buy that. It says that Wild West did not have the same mass appeal of D&D's Tolkien-esque thing. If anything, Western should have had more of a draw. Maybe it's not as much for geeks as for the normies. Maybe that was it.
Well, I think it falls to some. I think what happened to it was something that happened, or that we already discussed about. They were trying to sell Boot Hill to people who were interested in fantasy games, Tolkien-esque fantasy games, rather than people who were interested in the Wild West. If they had advertised Boot Hill on replays of Gunsmoke, it would have gone off like a bat out of hell.
Oh, that's true. It was also supposed to be more of a miniature game, even more miniature war fighting focused than the original D&D. So there was limited role-playing options there in the original edition. And combat was incredibly deadly. So you could create a new character, and in the first adventure, he's dead. And there's no resurrection, no elves, so there's no appeal. That being said, so maybe it's time for a resurgence of actual Wild West games, even if there's some tweaking to it, like actual magic or more of a heroic cast of the characters. And it'd be nice to see.
We're going to have an entire section of Heroes of Horror for the Wild West.
Mm-hmm. And what about a Wild West role-playing game? Not just say console or PC, and not just say a Rockstar game, or not just a JRPG which happens to have guns as a special attack and some sort of weird pseudo western. Wild Arms was a bit like fascist. What was that? Trigun, but not quite that much. It was fantasy elements as well.
Trigun was freaking awesome. That is a perfect representation of a futuristic Wild West game.
Mm-hmm. So. Again, this is another genre which is wide open, if not in writing and series television, but for role-playing games and tabletop and console. I mean, there really aren't a lot of definitive examples of that. There are a lot of Western style games, where you have Western themes, Wild West themes put into it, it's not actually Wild West. Again, the best example of that would be Red Dead, but I don't quite qualify as a role-playing game. I mean, it's not a terrible game, but it's a Rockstar game, so it has its own hiccups.
Actually, now that I think about it, if you did a Wild West computer game, but you did it as the squad RPG concept that I mentioned before, so you could have the posse going out, and the scenario would be like the posse going out to hunt down a dangerous outlaw, or you could have your band of thieves trying to rob a train.
Mm-hmm. There we go. That would be the perfect setting for it, because it fits.
Yeah, you could even get around the whole permadeath thing, by allowing new characters to come in with a quote unquote legacy or inheritance perk that they got from the old character, my older brother ran with you. I got his gun when he died, and I mean use it to put a bullet in the man what killed him.
Or just do the whole Dark Sun thing where you have 3 characters basically in the back burner.
Yeah, or that.
Yeah. All right. There actually is one more current role-playing game which is set in the actual Wild West, although there's some alternative history crap going on. That is Kenzer & Company's Aces and Eights. This is an actual role-playing game with its own system set in the Wild West, though it's called Shattered Frontiers because alternate system, the Civil War, the Confederates won, so we have 2 countries and a couple of Indian reservations which are important enough and powerful enough to be their own countries, not just victims. So there's another example.
I didn't even know about that one.
Yeah, it's from Kenzer Co. It's the same company that published Knights of the Dinner Table and Kingdom of Calamar and a few other systems. Yeah, Aces and Eights, I believe. Yeah.
And this is for those people who think that we only use this podcast to advertise our game.
Balls, no, we hardly ever talk about our own games.
Oh, I talk about them all the damn time, but that's because I'm actually in the process of writing them, so they're consuming a huge portion of my life.
Mm-hmm, fair enough. Well, big portion of my life too, but I mean on the podcast.
True.
Yeah. All right. So we went over that. We went over the kind of definitive themes, and we didn't have to. I don't think we have to talk much about why it interests people. We already went into that, and I also think we kind of underlined why it would work well for a role-playing game, both tabletop and console. So, I mean, it is the Wild West genre doesn't have the same insane draw as it did like back in the 50s and 60s, but I think it's still fertile ground for exploration and stories.
Actually, what I think is if somebody did come up do a novel concept for a Wild West style computer game, and they released, say, a web comic that was sponsored and took place in the same universe as their Western game, and then they released say a novel series that was like side stories for that Western game, stories of popular NPCs, and then they released the actual computer game, essentially do a multimedia push for it, and then release the computer game. I think it could really take off and become a major property virtually overnight with only a minimum amount of relative effort.
I mean, we shouldn't talk about that on the podcast then, Tyler.
Well, it isn't like we have the resources to do it or are going to have them anytime soon.
Well, we'll see. Well, point still well taken, though. Anything else you want to add? Because, again, kind of limited discussion of this, but it's one I did want to go over.
I'm pretty much tapped out.
Yep, and it's actually almost about an hour now, so I think it's a good time to sign off.
So much for a short episode.
Well, it's only 1 hour, and the previous one went up to like an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay, if you want to get technical.
So, anyways, this has been the Daemoneye podcast, episode 17. I won't give it a name because a lot of stuff going on here. I'm Tristan Neifler.
I'm full of juice and ready for use.
And we're signing off. See you later, Space Cowboy.